Greetings, ladies and gentlefish, and welcome back to another subscriber replay, or video of subscriber replays. And this time I thought I'd take advantage of some replays sent in by Wolf C, because frankly it has been quite literally years since I showcased any of his replays, and he sent in a clutch of mid-tier American tank destroyer games. These are quite popular machines, and I haven't really shown one in quite some time. So, seemed appropriate to do so. You're going to have 3 of them today. And this first one, by the way, Wolf C's in the T67, Tier 5. He's in a Tier 5 maximum match here on Malinovka. But I do just want to highlight that with the exception of his commander, who is Queen Maeve, his crew suck. They're less than 100% in terms of crew training. They're rubbish. So please bear that in mind as you watch this. The other reason I wanted to show these games is because it allows me to waffle on about the world's sexiest subject, American tank destroyer doctrine in World War II. Oh yeah! That's alright. I'm going to try not to waffle on and bore you too much. But, I like my history. Go figure. A lot of people criticise the Sherman. And this is where people will think, Chip, you've completely lost it. You said American tank destroyers, the Sherman isn't a tank destroyer. I'm getting there, I'm getting there. A lot of people criticise the Sherman for having kind of a weedy gun and being somewhat, well, undergunned. But the thing you have to remember about the Americans in particular is that they, in terms of procurement of new equipment and material for the American army, they had a policy of, well, basically there needing to be an actual operational need for the thing you're getting. So, if for example you were going to get a new tank, or if you were going to upgun an existing one, you needed the boys on the ground to go, hey, we need a thing. And the thing is, the Americans, the army, were pretty happy with the Sherman. You have to remember that most of the time, a tank doesn't fight other tanks. You know, most situations are dealing with machine gun nests or bunkers or things that are giving the infantry problems, but a tank of pretty much any persuasion is relatively well equipped to deal with. You know, a machine gun's going to bounce off the Sherman's armour with no real difficulty, and the gun, 75mm gun that was originally found on the Sherman, is perfectly capable of dealing with such scenarios, especially firing HE, which that gun was actually pretty good at doing. So there wasn't really a perceived need for it, and the other reason for that was that, well, you have to remember, American tanks like the Sherman were never designed to fight other tanks. Sure, they could do it, but that was never their main purpose. The tanks that were designed to fight other tanks were the tank destroyers. And the American philosophy with regard to using tank destroyers was that they would be all in some sort of central huddle, with all the fun stuff happening around them. And when some friendly forces encountered a glut of enemy armour, they'd call the tank destroyers and go, Bob, we need some help. And Bob and his tank destroyer buddies would sally forth and be the cavalry that rocked up, wrecked the enemy armour, and then go back to whatever lair they were hiding in, ready for the next encounter with enemy armour, and rinse and repeat. And already you can probably see how that's going to influence how Americans would want their tank destroyers. They would need to obviously have a punchy gun because they're tank destroyers, but they would also need to be mobile in order to quickly go from hotspot to hotspot, essentially. And they didn't need to pack a huge amount of armour, because, well, the tank destroyer's job wasn't to lead the charge off into no man's land or whatever. Their job was to rock up, shoot the bad guy, and you knew where the bad guy were and they didn't know you were coming, and then clear off. That was it. So you needed a big fat gun, and you needed to be fast. And so the ideal, I suppose, American tank destroyer was the M18. the Hellcat. It's fast, terrible armour, and a punchy 76mm gun. Now, all that sounds well and good in theory, but in practice, it wasn't quite how things worked out. I'm not going to go into it necessarily every single reason for that, but there are a couple of things to bear in mind about that way of doing things. So, firstly, it relies upon decent communications. You have to bear in mind, Second World War, we're in the 1940s. Radio communication is still very much in its infancy, and not necessarily very reliable. And so what that means is that any sort of attempt at this kind of communication-based sort of combined arms approach, which is essentially what the American tank destroyer doctrine necessitated, well, it doesn't necessarily work as reliably as you might like. And so in practice, that's probably going to mean that your TDs are actually going to have to stick around a little bit, just in case. The other thing was the opinion of crews. The crews of Hellcats, for example, M18s, noted that the speed of the tank, the speed of the machine, was not actually very useful, certainly not when you got into a fight. And the lack of armour, the Hellcat packed something like 16mm of hull armour, which was good enough for dealing with rifle rounds and not a great deal else. The lack of armour was really quite concerning, because tank destroyer crew knew if someone was going to try and shoot at them, well, that was not going to end well. And finally, let's just consider the perspective of the unit that the TDs have rocked up to help. You know, let's say you're an American, hello, V1, you're an American infantry commander, for the sake of argument, and you want some tank destroyer help because you've encountered a couple of enemy panzers or something. And the cavalry rock up and deal with the enemy panzers, and then you're like, right, this is awesome. Do you know what this means? This means we can push on with armoured support. This is great. We can make much more steady gains. We can fulfill our objectives. This is amazing. And the tank destroyer commander Bob's like, right, done that. Bye now. See you later. Give us a call if you need us. Wait, what? No, I need you now. And so in reality, tank destroyers ended up not necessarily being used in a way in which the doctrine envisaged. And also more interim machines, such as, for example, the M10, sometimes called the Wolverine, actually ended up being perhaps more prevalent and more popular than the M18. The M10 it used a variety of different components from the Sherman project. It had thicker armour than the M18. And whilst the 3-inch gun wasn't as powerful as the 76mm gun found on the Hellcat, still perfectly good enough. In fact, to the point that as the Allied armies moved through Italy, M10s were often used in the role of self-propelled gun, because they could elevate their guns high enough, and frankly a 75 or 76mm high explosive round will definitely do the job there. So all of that is a really long-winded way of saying, hey look, American tank destroyer doctrine, it was a nice idea in principle, I suppose, but in practice didn't quite work out the way they envisaged. As I've been waffling on, by the way, Wolfsea here has been driving around on Malinovka, doing some damage and picking up a kill. It's just this KV-222 who is left sitting up on the hill on 3 kills. Now, that machine is... the less said about that, the better. It's a Tier 5 Soviet premium heavy tank, which decides to mate the stock turret of the KV-1 with the hull of the KV-3. Now, the stock turret on the KV-1 isn't amazing. The hull of the KV-3 is, well, it's a Tier 7 heavy tank at the end of the day. And so what you get is a very well-armoured tank. Oh, set him on fire. Which, in order to deal with, you have to shoot in the turret, which is great if you're an experienced, seasoned player, and you know that, but this is Tier 5. Plenty of the people you're going to be shooting at aren't going to be that. and so the KV-222 is a bit of a monster if we're going to be honest, and frankly, even if you do know to shoot it in the turret, that doesn't guarantee it's going to work. Anyway, that was the first game. Let's have a look at the post-game stats for this, and then we've got a couple of others to look at. So there we go then, that was enough for third class mastery, bruiser, duelist and fire for effect, and some of you may be looking at that and going, third class? I thought that might have been a little bit higher. He did a respectable amount of damage, and he did indeed do a respectable amount of damage, but what you have to bear in mind is that most of that damage was done from longer ranges. It was Wolfsea not spotting for himself, and you take quite an experience hit for things like that, and that's just playing a tank destroyer, generally speaking, as they want to be played, but you do still take an XP hit for it, so just something to bear in mind there. And actually ended up having a pretty nice impact on that game. Finished third on his team by experience, and that would have been second on the team by damage, and top by kills, which is always nice. Shout out to the T-34 shielded on the friendly team for 1554 damage there and over 1000 base XP, and also for the friendly M8A1 who managed over 1100 damage in his tier 4. Shout out should also go to the enemy KV-222. He might have been in a ridiculously overpowered tank. Was he Spartacus 7403, but even so, he was pretty much the only thing keeping that team rolling, let's be honest. And to be fair, I guess his platoon mate was doing well as well. 29 shots fired, 16 hits, 11 penetrations for 1,262 damage, 687 of which was from more than 300 meters. 3 hits received, all of them penetrated because the T-67 does not have armor. 6 enemy vehicles damaged, 2 destroyed, 236 assistance damage. Actually made a loss on that game. Wolfsea did fire a few APCR rounds there, especially against the KV-220 to deal with him. So a small loss there, but nothing too significant to worry about. And, you know, with a premium account and ×2 for the first win, that was pretty much 2,000 experience, which is nice, especially when you've got a terrible crew and you're having to train them up. For our second game then, we find ourselves here on Studzianki. I've probably hideously mispronounced that, and I apologise, but yeah, like, good luck. This is a tier 6 maximum match, and Wolfsea this time is in the M36 tank destroyer, sometimes referred to as the Slugger or the Jackson, and indeed it's that latter name that these days this machine uses in game. Now, we should point out that we can already see Wolfsea's Jackson is not fully upgraded. This thing is using, by the look of it, the stock turret, and but I think that is the 90mm gun. So, historically, what set this American tank destroyer apart was that gun. It used the M3 90mm gun, which was, in terms of combat capacity, broadly comparable with the L56 88mm gun that the Germans used. That is, of course, the infamous 88mm flat gun, the gun used on the Tiger I. The two guns are roughly comparable in terms of capability. Here in game, however, if you compare this and the other tier 6 American tank destroyer, the M18, whilst historically the M18 used a 76mm gun, in game it has been rather upgraded so that it is also packing a 90mm, the same 90mm actually. And so you get two machines with the same gun. The Hellcat, the M18, is the more mobile machine, but its armour sucks. The Jackson here gets slightly better stats on the gun in terms of reload and whatnot. There's not a huge amount in it, but the gun is slightly better. It's slower, but it does get a little bit more armour, though that shouldn't make you think, oh, this thing has loads of armour. It doesn't. But it does get a little more than the Hellcat. To be fair, so does a toilet roll, but you get the point. Now, Wolf here, I'm just going to double check. I'm pretty sure... Yeah, we are using the 90mm gun here. 160 penetration, goodbye T6 medium, and 240 alpha damage. And thank you for driving in front of us as we're trying to get a shot off, and the gun misses. Now, I must admit, I played this thing a little bit recently, and because this is a tank that I liked enough to keep. And the thing I found was that it feels a bit power crept, if I'm going to be honest. The armour, which was never fantastic, but it was better than the M18s. The armour just really doesn't cut it, to the point that I was getting penetrated in the turret front by 105mm HE rounds from Shermans and Panzer IVs. The armour just really doesn't cut it, and the gun, you find yourself in this awkward position where for a tier 6 tank destroyer, the gun is kind of yeah. These 90mm guns, I would say, are among the worst tier 6 tank destroyer guns. The offset, of course, being you have a fully rotatable turret. And I was just having a painful experience with it. Maybe painful's a little bit too strong, but it was a frustrating experience at the very least. And like I said, it just felt a little bit power crept. And having recently played the Achilles, okay, it gets 10 degrees of gun depression, but the Achilles has much better gun handling, much better DPM, better accuracy, better penetration. In fact, the only thing about the gun that isn't better is just the alpha damage. Don't get me wrong, better alpha damage is better, but is it worth sacrificing basically everything else? There we go, kill on the VK3001D there for Wolf's second kill. So the scoreline is 9-5, by the way. This is not going to be a particularly long match, as Wolf just racking up the kills here. Nice shot there into the KV-1S. Slightly low damage roll, but not the end of the world. Can he finish this fellow off? There we go. He becomes kill number 3. Flat Panzer is up ahead of Wolf here at the A5 position, and there's also a Tyran 3 prototype to our left. Not that that's the most intimidating machine in the world, if we're going to be honest. Wolf's up to 3 kills. There is a potential Top Gun here that he could pick up. Oh, that one bounced, robbed of that shot. But now the guy is reduced to the point where that's kill number 4. Stug 4 and the Tyran now, and if Wolf wants to pick up a Top Gun here, he's going to have to hustle because his team are going to get these guys if he isn't too careful. This is very much the stage in the game where you don't want to play too passively. You just need to go for it and get some damage in. Yeah, your team is going to win. There goes the Tyran, but the team claims the Stug. Damn it! No Top Gun for Wolf there, but still 5 kills is a nice result to have there. So once again, let's have a look at the post-game stats for that quick one. So there we go then, that was enough for second class mastery, bruiser, fighter and fire for effect. Always nice to have a quickie here or there in these sorts of things. And as you can see, Wolf did quite a good amount of damage to a nice range of enemy machines. 1,380 damage done, 5 kills, 849 base experience, puts him second on his team by experience done, and the enemy team just evaporated, frankly. They really didn't put up that much of a fight. 10 shots fired, 9 hits, 7 pens for that damage count. 600 of which was from more than 300 meters, 7 enemy vehicles damaged, 5 destroyed, 621 assistance damage, 1.26 kilometers travelled, and apparently no ammunition resupply costs. Maybe Wolf had some ammo stocked up, or maybe what replays here is being a little bit derpy. But quite a nice amount of credits there for what looks like a fairly substantial mission payout and a decent amount of experience. One more to show you in this replay. Lastly then, we are joining Wolf C here in a tier 7 match on Mountain Pass, and well, it wouldn't really be a video looking at some mid-tier American tank destroyers without some sort of Hellcat making its appearance, right? This is the Super Hellcat, this is not the Tech Tree tank. This is the reward tank that Wargaming gave out to people for, I can't remember how many years. Basically having played the game for a little while. This is essentially the original Hellcat with a bit more hit points, bumped up a tier, because the original Hellcat at tier 6 was rather overpowered, so Wargaming nerfed it. So then they gave people the Super Hellcat sometime later, which is kind of the unnerfed version, but at tier 7, and despite all that, it still seems to be a pretty decent TD as far as I can work out, though I've not actually played it myself yet. Hello, Mr. Panzer. Oh, just managed to hit him. Now, this thing does seem to get rather lackluster penetration, so your penetration goes from tier 6 at 160 to 167 here at tier 7, which is not particularly good, and even your gold pen is only 210, so what you notice a lot of Super Hellcat drivers doing is just rolling their face all over the 2 key and using 210 pen to shoot people, because the penetration's a little bit lackluster, and that's true, but it's mobile, you've got gun depression, you've got actually surprisingly good gun handling. I'm not about to tell you it's, M48 pattern levels of gun handling, but it's surprisingly good. And so actually, whilst I haven't played it, I suspect in most situations you can make the 170 odd penetration work on this thing. You can certainly make it work on the T25/2, so you should be able to make it work on this. Mountain Pass, not necessarily the best map in the world for what is still at the end of the day a lightly armoured tank destroyer, but at least Wolf's top tier here. So he's got one damaging shot in on that Panzer IV-H, who probably is wishing that, Wolf didn't. And as it turns out, actually, both of the Panzers have passed on to a better place pretty early on. They were in a tier 5 platoon there. They probably looked at this matchmaking, went and died, but let's be honest, a Panzer IV can still be a very dangerous tank, especially if it's using that 105mm howitzer. Maybe that will change a little bit if Wargaming follow through with the HE changes, but we shall see. Now, this is a rather dicey situation because that's a T29, which is a scary tank however you wish to look at it. Nice shot there from Wolf, and he gets some cover. The T29 has already fired, so Wolf can take advantage of this guy's reload to try and get another shot in, but that was not a particularly well-aimed shot. He needs to be hitting this guy in the hull. The turret on the T29 is notoriously tough. And Wolf actually switches here to APCR. Now, in this particular instance, that does make sense, but you still need to actually hit the front of the guy's hull. If you're going to hit the side of him like that, sloped back at that angle, you're still going to bounce. That's just something to be aware of. So the front of the T29, if you're packing around 150, 160 penetration, it is not a reliable penetration, essentially. KV-1 has now rushed Wolf. KV-1 is packing the 122mm howitzer, and KV-1 just done goofed. And Wolf has a little bit of a brown trouser moment there. The KV-1 messes up by not penetrating 2 HE rounds in a row. He really should have played this a lot better. Wolf messes up by accidentally fat-fingering the 3 key and firing HE at the KV-1. The KV-1 messes up again by not penetrating the third 122mm HE round into Wolf there. Instead of face-hugging Wolf, that guy should have just backed off, aimed properly at the hull, and he'd have been absolutely fine. And then Wolf switches to AP to put a shot into the T1 Heavy. I'm sorry, I wanted to include that replay just for that moment there. I don't know. I don't know. This thing has 16 or so millimeters of hull armor. The KV-1's howitzer has like 50, 60 penetration, something like that, doing over 400 damage per penetrating shot. Wolf should have died there. To any seasoned, shall we say, KV-1 driver using that howitzer. I use the howitzer on my KV-1. I still have the KV-1. Wolf should have been dead there. But no, apparently not. Oh dear. Sorry. This was just a really, really quick game. It tickled me. It tickled me. But anyway, there we go. M18 Hellcat. Well, Super Hellcat, complete with some nice artwork showing a lady and a black cat. Way. Anyway, let's have a look at the post-game stats for this one. So that ended up being a little bit of a comedy of errors, I guess. But it tickled me, so screw it. Third class mastery and fire for effect, and somehow Wolf survived that. I'm still not really entirely sure how, but we'll run with it. And he actually finished, what, 5th on his team by experience? It was just another game where the enemy team just evaporated, and the friendly team were able to pull a win out there. And he even says in the replay description, no idea why I fired a round of HE, I think I was just hitting every key on the keyboard at the time. Oh dear, I just find it funny. Oh, and of course it's a Lefay thingy that finishes top of the enemy team. Oh, those things are disgusting. 9 shots fired, 9 hits, 6 pens, 1 splash with that HE round. 1,255 damage done, most of it from pretty close range, 4 hits received. Right, now, this is where it says 1 non-penetration and 3 splash. The 3 splashes from that KV-1's howitzer. 4 enemy vehicles damaged, 1 destroyed, 233 assistance damage. He fired some gold rounds, so that ammunition cost is not quite right. But never mind. It was a bit of a laugh, and I don't know, just entertained me. So there we go, a trio of American mid-tier tank destroyer games for you there, complete with my own wafflings on stuff. Hope you guys enjoyed, possibly even found it vaguely informative. If you did, by all means feel free to catch some of my other videos, subscribe to my channel. You can catch Discord, there's a link in the description, there's also a link to Patreon in the description, and if you want to send in your own replays, upload them to whatreplays.com, copy the URL, post it into the relevant place on Discord, and I shall take a look. There are a bunch of different reasons I might showcase a replay. Anyway, as I said, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I wish you very happy hunting on that battlefield. Ciao, ciao.